All right, welcome back to Newsmax Now. I am Bill Tucker. My co-host for these 2 hours today is Nan Hayworth. And there she is. Take a bow, Nan. As hour one of today's program becomes history, we're going to take a look at some of the important events that happened on this day in history. For example, 1776, writer Thomas Paine published a little pamphlet. It was called Common Sense, setting forth his arguments in favor of American independence. Also on this day, Rocky, written by struggling actor Sylvester Stallone, began filming in 1976. It would go on to win Academy Awards for Best Picture, Director, and Editing. And then stepping back a little bit, 1913, future President Richard Nixon was born on this day. And in 1961, Nixon predecessor John F. Kennedy delivered his famed City upon a Hill speech to the General Court of Massachusetts before heading to the White House.
We must always consider, he said, that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us.
Man could deliver a speech, couldn't he?
Yes, he could. Yes, and do a press conference, ad lib.
Yeah.
He was
very good. What a lot of people don't know is actually that famous set of debates with him and Richard Nixon almost didn't happen well, they were supposed to be 4. He killed Nixon in the first one because his campaign folks went in knowing that Richard Nixon had a physiological condition which caused him to sweat a lot. And cranked up the heat in the studio. So Richard Nixon came off looking horrible in that first debate.
And he had hurt his knee, he had an infection,
So, in the second and third debates, it's never talked about, but it's true and you can go check it out, he won. And he won so well that they canceled the Kennedy people canceled the fourth debate because they thought we could take 2. We are not going to go back in and lose a third debate because they were worried they'd lose the election.
Radio listeners, as you know, gave the first debate to Nixon.
I know,
because they couldn't see his awful pallor.
Exactly, horrible, like daubing his face. All right, we don't go anywhere because we have hour 2 of Newsmax Now coming right up. Will Robert Mueller, who's heading the investigation of possible Russian collusion in our election, get to interview the president? Will he get a sit down? We're going to take a deep dive into that subject coming up at the top of the hour. And we're also going to be talking to the lawyer for the Bundys. He will be with us as well to talk about that case being thrown out and all charges having been dismissed. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to hour 2 of Newsmax Now. You're looking at our window here at the Newsmax studios down onto the corner of 42nd Street and 5th Avenue. I'm Bill Tucker. Thanks for staying with us and joining us. And with me is former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. She will be with me for this full hour as she was for the first one. She is also a board member on the Independent Women's Forum, a group I happen to have a great fondness for. It is time now to look in depth. And our subject today is Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible Russian collusion in our last election. It is being reported that President Trump may be interviewed by Mueller, perhaps within the next several weeks. Well, who better to talk about this with and a couple of other subjects than our next guest? Former federal prosecutor, founder of Freedom Watch, Larry Klayman, is joining us. And he's not with us yet, but he will be joining us. And Dan, one of the reasons that it is great to talk to him about this is, well, he does have, I will tell you up front, he has a dog in this hunt. Yes. He has filed a lawsuit to dismiss Mueller. Mm-hmm. So he will be interesting to talk to. In fact, I understand he's back on the line with it. Larry, we're going to take a deep dive into a couple of things, but first off, I know you don't like Mueller. I know you filed a lawsuit to have him removed, but could the president refuse to talk? Not talk.
He should refuse to talk, Bill. Yes, he should refuse to talk. There's executive privilege here, separation of powers, number one. Number two, anything that the president says will be used against him. They'll distort everything. Mueller has access to a lot of documents, a lot of sources, and frankly, with Mueller, who is not a man of integrity, he'll twist everything to the point where whatever the president says, he'll wind up being accused potentially of perjury. So no, he should not talk to Mueller. And the fact that his lawyers worked him into this situation, we're talking about Ty Cobb, Jay Sekulow, and Mike Dowd, we're talking about a situation where, frankly, it's negligent for them having put him in this place. And they've been predicting that this matter would have been over by Christmas, then it was New Year's, now it's this. A stand needs to be taken, and the president needs to fight back. It just can't be Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman. It's got to be the president himself. He's a fighter, and he should go with his instincts, and his instincts are not consistent with what his lawyers have been telling him.
Now, Larry, as you know, the president had a solo interview with the New York Times in which he asserted that he felt Robert Mueller was being fair, would be fair, and basically expressed confidence in the process. That may have surprised some folks. So how would he accommodate that statement with the approach that you just proposed to refuse to interview with Mueller?
Well, this is what I'm talking about. Bad advice. I mean, he's got bad advice from his lawyers. His lawyers obviously told him to say that. You know, in Washington, D.C. or anywhere else these days, you don't get anything by being nice. You don't look like you're being taken in a way. And the president knows that in his heart. And he should have fought back. He and his family and his associates were legally wiretapped. That's a violation of the Constitution. He should have brought a case like I did years ago, and I currently have one pending, for violation of his constitutional rights against Mueller, against Comey, and people at the FBI. He should also have been filing ethics complaints about the leaks of grand jury material that have been damaging him, his family, and his associates. I filed that complaint for Freedom Watch. People can see it at freedomwatchusa.org. And lastly, he should be insistent about getting a special counsel. That is not obstruction of justice to get a neutral lawyer outside of Washington. I volunteered, obviously. People can sign our petition at freedomwatchusa.org to urge that, or anyone else, to conduct a real investigation. Jeff Sessions is inert, and he needs to not only investigate Hillary Clinton, and he needs to not only investigate what went on in Fusion GPS and Uranium One and those issues, but he needs to have a special counsel to investigate what Mueller's been doing. Mm-hmm. Because what Mueller's been doing is illegal and in many respects, I believe, criminal. And that's why we filed this complaint against him, because it is illegal, it's criminal to leak grand jury information. And ask yourself, how is it that everybody knows that Mueller wants to interview the president right now? Yeah. They're leaking again. They're leaking again to put pressure on the president.
You know what? I'm going to ask you this at the risk of watching your head explode. I'm sure you read the article in The Hill today. The article detailing Peter Strzok and Lisa Page's texts between each other, not as lovers, but as conspirators. These two people were exchanging emails about a story that they had clearly planted in the press, and this is the text from Lisa Page. Article's out, but it's hidden behind a paywall, so I can't read it. And then Peter responds, Wall Street Journal? Boy, that was fast. Should I find it and tell the team? Obviously, they had planted this story, Larry. They were going to act like, gee, gosh, we didn't know. We just found it behind the paywall. These are people that are still on the government payroll. They're no longer on this investigation, but they're still on the government payroll. I'd love to get your take on this story.
Yeah, that's an outrage. You know, it's very hard to fire federal officials. What they do is they just promote them into some office without a phone. But yes, it's criminal in of itself. It's a conspiracy. And you talk about obstruction of justice. This is it. This is what's happened. You know, and I'm out here in Las Vegas, Bill. I mean, we know we want to talk about the Clintons, but a federal judge appointed by Obama, recommended by Harry Reid, yesterday found that the FBI had lied to her on the witness stand under oath. There were snipers out at the Bundy Ranch. Klayman obviously had his indictment thrown out yesterday. Yep. They destroyed evidence. They suppressed evidence. The prosecutors also lied. There's a whistleblower that came forward. This is a major FBI scandal. The FBI has become a cesspool of corruption. It needs to be cleaned up, and the president has the right to do that as well. This current FBI director, Christopher Wray, a nothing burger, to use a phrase that everybody's using these days. The guy just...
That's very hip of you to get that language in there. I do want to talk to you about this Bundy case, because Nan and I were talking about this earlier, and I have amazed. The district judge in this case is Gloria Navarro. Larry, she wasted no words in flat out condemning the prosecution. Flagrant disregard. She said in court, "You lied to me. You've been lying to the attorneys, to the defense attorneys. You're not answering discovery requests." It is horrible, the behavior of prosecutors in this case. Whether you agree with Clyde Bundy or not, he spent 2 years in jail because of this behavior. This has not been some, free kind of behavior that nobody got harmed and everybody gets to go ollie ollie home free on.
That's right, Bill. And we're considering lawsuits, civil rights lawsuits, and malicious prosecution lawsuits. That's under consideration. We, of course, have ethics complaints pending against the prosecutors. Again, with the Justice Department proceeding on that front, I'm asking the Attorney General, who finally agreed to do a review of this debacle after a year of my lobbying him. I've actually talked to him on the cell phone after he was confirmed to dig into this, because this is another FBI scandal, and it goes beyond Klayman Bundy. Klayman had a right not to pay the grazing fees. The land is owned by the state of Nevada, not by the federal government, and we're going to be filing a declaratory judgment action in state court in that regard. But, this judge, this is important. She was recommended by Harry Reid, who called the Bundys domestic terrorists. She was appointed and then confirmed by Obama and his Democrat Senate. And she didn't do this out of the goodness of her heart. Judge Gloria Navarro didn't want to go down with a sinking ship. She had been called by the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is a mainstream publication here in Las Vegas, a friend of the prosecutor. She did it to save her own skin. And she ripped the prosecution. She ripped the FBI. The BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is implicated. And I'll tell you something, this is one of the worst examples of the misuse of the federal enforcement powers of the Justice Department that I've ever seen. It's the worst. And this was the biggest victory for the American people. We fought a mini revolution. We fought the law, in quotes, and we won.
Larry, most impressive, and I want to thank you for having done that for the sake of every American. I mean, it's amazing how often President Obama and his administration spoke about rights and fairness and, how people had been deprived of those things. Now, question for you, Larry. We have the Bundy case. It's notorious, obviously. How many other Bundys are out there across the country? How many more cases like this that Freedom Watch could take up if you had, say, the resources?
Well, just in the context of the different prosecutions related to Bundy, I represent two defendants, Stephen Stewart and Rick Lavellian, who were acquitted, and their lawyers at the time, I wasn't lawyer for them at that time, didn't even present any evidence. The jury just couldn't convict them because the government had no evidence. They just grouped them all into 19 defendants. They tried them in 3 parts. They've lost every time, and we have countersuits for them pending under the Federal Tort Claims Act. We will be bringing civil rights actions as well for them. But yes, there are many defendants out there, and I'll tell you something. I was a federal prosecutor, and I was proud of being a Justice Department lawyer, but if I had to do it all over, Attorney General to help clean this up has become a cesspool, as I said, not just the FBI, but Main Justice as well. And we can see that in the Clinton scandals with this guy, Bruce Orr, who I worked with many years ago. But another Clinton scandal, he buried that back in the 1990s. But the Justice Department is a department of injustice.
Well, it's interesting because I read Jonathan Turley's legal blog, and he wrote about this case today at length. And one of the things he pointed out is he said Sessions is ordering a review of this case. But one of the things that Turley points out is that, as we're just talking about, this is not unique. I'm not, without getting into the legal terminology and everything else, but evidentiary standards are not routinely followed. There are things that our federal government does, bringing the power of the government down on individuals, and it's frightening. I mean, you read somebody like Turley. This is like a mainstream, self-described moderate Democrat. This is not some crazy right-wing, renegade. This is a big problem, Larry. That's why I like having you on to talk about these things.
And I know Jonathan, and he's a good man. He's one of the honest liberals that are out there. There are very few, frankly. But the reality here is look, the prosecutors got up in the Bundy case. They lied to the judge. They were playing with life imprisonment for all these defendants. There were 17 counts. And to lie to the judge and to hide evidence and to destroy it. And now we know there's a whistleblower that came forward, Larry Wilmot, from the FBI who will testify ultimately in whatever legal proceeding we may decide to bring that there was bias towards Mormons. They were calling them retards. They had targets on the heads of Klayman Bundy and his sons on the walls of the Bureau of Land Management in the district office here. It's unbelievable that this could happen. But yes, it does happen more often than one would think. And as a proud alumnus of the Justice Department, I'm disgusted. And the fact that Sessions sat on his hands for a year and did nothing. And I can tell you, I had communication after communication, written and oral, with his office. Yeah. An absolute disgrace. But at least now he's doing something. I want to work with him if he'll man up right now and clean up the Department of Justice.
Well,
it's a mess.
Let's hope, in fact, that he does exactly that. It's a fascinating story. We're not going to let this one go. It's too big, and it does go beyond the Bundys. Larry Klayman, founder of Freedom Watch, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
God bless, guys.
All right, coming up, we are going to go live with the man who walked on the moon and another one who was so close yet so far away. We're going to talk with Apollo astronauts Jim Lovell and Charlie Duke. You're not going to want to miss this. We'll be right back after this break.